Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Friday morning, talking 10 games around the NBA. Before we hop into the games, your quick reminder, please make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button down below. It goes a long way to helping me produce more content throughout the rest of the season. If you're not already following me on Twitter or taking advantage of my daily content and projections and all that good stuff, you can rectify that by taking advantage of my Patreon offers at patreon.com/BrentHyden, or you can hit me up on Twitter at BrentHyden1, and I can hook you up with a 50% off package for the rest of the season. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the games. We do have 10 games on tonight's slate. Washington at Orlando, the first game of the night. Orlando 4-point favorites in this one, 217.5 over under. Tomas Satoransky comes in on quite the hot streak, averaging 14.7 points on 18 of 27 shooting over his last three games. Had a good outing yesterday against the Golden State Warriors. He is definitely interesting here. Looking at the Wizards here, coming in a tough spot, had to play Golden State last night at home. They hit the road to take on the Magic. Orlando Magic really getting abused in the paint and on corner threes lately, as well as just getting pummeled from the three-point line. They're allowing 36.6% shooting on overall three-pointers. Otto Porter, one of my favorite options from this game. 13% of his shots come as corner threes, along with 16% of his shots in the paint. This was prior to yesterday, but in his last 10 games, he has attempted at least 14 field goal attempts in 6 of those games, has at least 6 rebounds in 6 of those games as well. Orlando ranking 16th in defensive efficiency to power forwards. Otto Porter, 6,100 on DraftKings. A very solid price here. He's 7,100 over on FanDuel. A little less interesting. But this is a spot where I do have a lot of interest in him here tonight. We know he's going to take a lot of shots. Really struggled against the Warriors last night, but I do have interest in him here. Bradley Beal as well, coming in at 8,900 on DraftKings, 10-1 on FanDuel. That's a little unappealing, but he's a guy most nights going to get you 40-plus fantasy points. Orlando ranks 18th in defensive efficiency to opposing shooting guards. They've allowed him to shoot 43.2% from the floor, 37% from three. Beal has posted a team-high usage of 30.5% over the last 10 games and ranks 9th in the NBA over that span with 28 points per game. This is a really good spot for him. I mentioned Tomas Satoransky, a little bit of a risky option as he has been rather inconsistent, but with 22% of his shots coming in the paint and Orlando struggling to defend point guards, he is definitely interesting here. He comes in at 5,500 on DraftKings, 6K over on FanDuel. As I mentioned, he has been on a little bit of a hot streak recently. Again, there is some inconsistency issues, but he does have lots of upside, and I do have interest in him. Thomas Bryant, you can use in tournaments. He's also been playing pretty well recently, shooting the ball not too bad, 69.6% from the floor recently. More of a cashy option. Obviously, the matchup not the best, but he's more of a cash option in this spot. Moving on to the Orlando side of the things, Wizards, obviously one of the worst defenses in the NBA. Nikola Vucevic continues to be a monster, has a team-high 27.2% usage rate. Washington getting pummeled in the paint and on the glass, allowing they're 24th in defensive efficiency to centers. Washington is giving up 48 rebounds per game. They're giving up 50 points in the paint and allowing opponents to shoot 65.2% at the rim. Nikola Vucevic, one of my favorite plays on the slate. One of my favorite plays almost every single night. He comes in at 9,700 on DraftKings, 10-2 on FanDuel. Definitely love the spot here for him. He's been playing really well, and he has actually averaged 19 points and 12.5 rebounds against the Wizards this season. DJ Augustin continues to be an underrated cash game point guard option. Washington 27th in defensive efficiency to opposing point guards. They're giving up 26.6 points, 9.9 assists, 37.4% three-point shooting, and with him taking 28% of his shots at the rim, he definitely has some room to have success here. He's 5,100 on DraftKings, 4,900 on FanDuel. I guarantee he'll be really low owned, going to be overlooked in this spot given the value that has already surfaced on the slate. I like Terrence Ross. 50% of his shots come from three. Evan Fournier, second on the team in usage at 22.2%. Both of these guys project to be really strong options. This game's going to go overlooked, and there's definitely some ways to get some exposure here tonight. I would lean Ross in cash, Evan Fournier in tournaments. Aaron Gordon also just a tournament option here tonight. Moving on, We have the next game of the night, Miami at Cleveland. Miami 9-point favorites in this one, 210 over under. Larry Nance is expected to suit up in this one. Goran Dragic, Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson, and David Nwaba remain out. There is really not a whole lot to like from the Cleveland side, but I will cover that in just a second. Miami is still tinkering with their rotations. We saw Rodney Magruder fall out of the rotation last game. Tyler Johnson enter the starting lineup. We saw Dion Waiters get decent run last game. But with Eric Spoelstra, again, kind of just riding whoever is actually playing well, it makes these guys a little bit risky, especially Dion Waiters. While the matchup is outstanding for him, the price tag is really solid for him, the minutes have been there for him, it is a little bit concerning that his spot in the rotation is far from secure. That being said, he makes for a really, really strong tournament option in this spot tonight. Justice Winslow, Tyler Johnson are the two appealing options from the backcourt as well. Tyler Johnson coming in at 4,200 on DraftKings, 4,900 on FanDuel. Justice Winslow, 6,200 on DraftKings, 6,400 on FanDuel. Cavaliers ranking 29th in defensive efficiency, two opposing backcourts. Those minutes are fairly secure for both of those guys. Cleveland allowing opponents to shoot 68.2% of the rim. That's pretty important when we have guys in Tyler Johnson, who takes 24% of his shots at the rim, and Justice Winslow taking 32% of his shots at the rim. I definitely like getting exposure to these guys. Tyler Johnson, 4,200 is really appealing in cash games. Not a ton of upside, but again, that price and cash is really, really appealing. The same with Justice Winslow. Did struggle against the Clippers. He does have upside, probably more of a tournament option. Has really struggled the last couple of games. One of those not being a very good matchup, but again, against the Cavaliers in a spot where he's averaged almost 40 fantasy points this season, I really, really like him. I do absolutely love Dwayne Wade. Revenge game. Last time he's going to face Cleveland in his career. He's another guy, continues just to take a lot of shots and minutes, kind of in the mid-20s, has upside. This is a spot where I have a lot of interest in Dwayne Wade. As I mentioned, Cleveland really, really bad against opposing backcourts. Hassan Whiteside got over 30 minutes last game, has not done that in the two games against Cleveland already this season. He still makes for a decent GPP option here. Josh Richardson, always fine in cash in tournaments. Cleveland ranks 22nd in defensive efficiency to opposing small forwards. Josh Richardson, 6,900 on DraftKings, 6,700 on FanDuel. I liked him better whenever he was back down below 6K, but again, there is some potential for him to produce here. I don't hate Bam Adebayo, Derek Jones Jr., Chetty Osman, James Johnson if you're building tournament lineups. Unfortunately, again, outside of Adebayo, minutes far from secure. Even Adebayo, 16 minutes last game, 5 fouls. Some of that could be why Hassan Whiteside got more run, but again, minutes far from secure for any of these guys, but the spot is absolutely superb. I would probably lean Adebayo and maybe Derek Jones Jr., who only got 11 minutes against the Clippers, but again, this is a spot where he could definitely have some success as the Cavaliers do struggle to defend the rim. Looking at the Cavaliers side, again, I don't have a lot of interest in anybody from this side. Ante Zizic is fine. Unfortunately, the return of Larry Nance could eat into his minutes just a little bit. I still have him projected at 30 minutes. The matchup, not that great. You can use him in cash, but there's a decent chance that we're going to have plenty of value at center open up. So not a whole lot of interest there. Colin Sexton, Alec Burks, Jordan Clarkson are the guys to at least look at. Miami has struggled to defend the three-point line lately, allowing 37.2% on above the break threes. They've also struggled to defend in the paint, allowing 45.9% shooting in the paint. That would definitely benefit guys like Rodney Hood, who takes 27% of his shots in the paint, 30% from three. Again, Alec Burks, 19% of his shots come in the paint, 34% from three. Jordan Clarkson, 25% of his shots come in the paint, 33% come from three. Unfortunately, minutes kind of the issue for most of these guys. Clarkson currently projected at 24, Rodney Hood 27, Colin Sexton 30, Alec Burks just 22. With Larry Nance returning, it definitely shortens out or lengthens that rotation and makes it really, really tough to like a whole lot from that side of the game. And of course, there's always better places to look than anyone from the Cleveland side. Moving on to a fantastic game to target, one that I hope goes overlooked if value opens up on the rest of the slate. That's New York Knicks at Brooklyn. Brooklyn 10.5-point favorites in this one, 224 over under. Allen Crabbe, Jarrett Dudley, Karis LeVert, Luke Kornet, and Spencer Dinwiddie all out for this game. Emmanuel Mudiay, Trey Burke, and Rondé Hollis Jefferson are questionable in this game. Gordian's Kirks, 28 from 44 from the floor over his last 5 games. Looking at the Knicks side of things, a lot of this is going to rely on the status of Emmanuel Mudiay, and so that's something that we definitely need to monitor throughout the afternoon. Also, the status of the starting lineup, because as we saw last game, Enes Kanter, who was supposed to start at center, ended up being a DNP CD. That's something to keep an eye on here. Noah Vonleh started at center last game and is extremely appealing regardless of whether he starts at center or power forward tonight. We love taking centers against the Nets. Nets allowing 62.2 fantasy points per game, ranking 25th in defensive efficiency to the position. We know they're getting pummeled by opposing big men. This is an excellent spot for Noah Vonleh, who is 5,900 on DraftKings, 5,900 on FanDuel. I have a ton of interest in Noah Vonleh in this spot here tonight. Kevin Knox, we can rely on him for minutes. Unfortunately, he has been unreliable whenever it comes to just about anything else he does. That being said, he makes for a pretty strong cash and tournament option here. He comes in at just 5,200 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. The Nets have struggled to defend opposing small forwards. They're allowing 21 points, 7 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 47% shooting, and 42.2% shooting from 3. 33% of his shots come in the paint and the mid-range, where the Nets have really struggled to defend this season. They're allowing right around 44% to both of those areas. I really like Kevin Knox, 5,200 again. This is a pretty good spot for him. He's going to definitely be overlooked here tonight, and that could be a mistake. So definitely make sure you get some exposure to Kevin Knox, especially in tournaments. Trey Burke, Frank Ntilikina, Alonzo Trier would be the guys to look at if Emmanuel Mudiay misses this game. Mudiay himself is fine in tournaments. Frank Ntilikina and Alonzo Trier are 2 value options we can consider regardless of the status of Mudiay. Unfortunately, Alonzo Trier coming out 4,700 on DraftKings, 5K on FanDuel, probably going to be a little bit of a popular option. But again, if Mudiay misses, if Trey Burke misses this game, he would definitely see a boost in minutes. Tim Hardaway Jr., always just a tournament option. Unfortunately, the minutes have not necessarily been there for him in a few of these games recently. He did get the minutes last game, played 35, but we did see 27 against OKC, 24 against Washington, 29 against Indiana. Some of that being blowout related. But that being said, he is on the trading block, and well, there's no motivation for the Knicks to continue to give him run. Moving on to the Brooklyn side of this game, it starts with D'Angelo Russell, who has just been phenomenal recently, and he gets a great matchup against the New York Knicks that are giving up 115.4 points per game to opponents. Opposing point guards are smashing them, averaging almost 50 fantasy points per game, averaging 22.6 points, 6.8 rebounds, 10.1 assists, and 43.6% field goal shooting. D'Angelo Russell has been outstanding over his last 10 games, averaging 24.3 points, taking like 18.8 field goal attempts per game, and shooting like 50% from the floor. Just looking at his game log, you can see why I absolutely love D'Angelo Russell here. 50 fantasy points, 50 fantasy points, 50 fantasy points, 26, 50, 47. Some pretty high upside games, and now we don't have to worry about Spencer Dinwiddie eating into his minutes, because Spencer Dinwiddie going to miss extended time with a finger injury. When you take Allen Crabbe, Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, and Jared Dudley off the floor, D'Angelo Russell, 32.2% usage rate, averaging 1.44 fantasy points per minute. When you take Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, who is questionable for this game, off the floor, that number goes up even more. It's into the 1.5 range there. D'Angelo Russell, a core option for me tonight. That means Shabazz Napier becomes one of the top value plays on the slate. Shabazz Napier, just 3,600 on DraftKings, 3,800 on FanDuel, projected to basically slide right into Dinwiddie's minutes at right around the 28 to 30 mark. And well, that's just too cheap for someone playing the Knicks. So Shabazz Napier and D'Angelo Russell, 2 guys that I will absolutely be pairing together in my lineups. As I have stated before countless times, please take this into account. It does not matter. Negative correlation does not exist for value plays. Yes, you can play D'Angelo Russell and Shabazz Napier in the same lineup. Negative correlation is mostly a myth anyways. Looking at the rest of this team, Joe Harris, a really strong cash option, has top 20 fantasy points in 5 straight games. Continues to be a guy that does have plenty of upside, and against the Knicks, who struggle to defend the 3-point line, He's obviously one of my other favorite ways to get exposure to the Nets here tonight. The Knicks have issues defending opposing small forwards and defending the three-point line, so that makes Rodions Kurucs and Damari Carroll appealing in the spot. Kurucs' minutes have been a little bit of an issue recently. He has struggled at times, but he comes in at 4,300 on DraftKings, 4,100 on FanDuel. He has been over 20 in back-to-back games. The games like this against Orlando are a little bit concerning, but if Rondé Hollis-Jefferson misses, there's obviously more minutes for Kurucs to go around. I like him, and I like Damari Carroll a significant amount. Jarrett Allen, a really strong tournament option here, and you can even look at like Ed Davis as an option, Trevion Graham in tournaments as well. Moving on, Sacramento at Memphis. Not a whole lot to talk about in this game. Going to breeze over it pretty quickly. So that we can get on to some better games here. Memphis 2-point favorites, 210.5 over under. The only real injuries to keep an eye on here would be Shumpert, Temple. All these guys are probable. Kyle Anderson, Chandler Parsons, Dylan Brooks remain out. I don't like attacking Memphis most nights. That being said, they've struggled to defend the paint over the last 10 games. They're allowing 46.3% shooting in the paint. And they've also really struggled to defend the three-point line. They're allowing 52.5% shooting on corner threes and 36% shooting on above the break threes over the last 10 games. They've also struggled against shooting guards. They ranked 22nd defensive efficiency to the position. I love Buddy Hield in the spot. 50% of his shots come in the paint and are from three, so that bodes really well for him. He did just torch Memphis the last time these teams faced off. He's 6,800 on DraftKings. People are going to fade him. I've already seen him written up as a guy that you don't want to play tonight. And again, I think that's a mistake. We've seen him produce here against Memphis, averaging 36 fantasy points in 3 games against them. So we know he can produce. He's going to be really, really low owned. I love Buddy Hield as a tournament option, but I even like him in Memphis. Bogdan Bogdanovic, I even like him in cash. I said I like him in Memphis. Whoops. I like him in cash a little bit too. Bogdan Bogdanovic also really appealing here. 65% of his shots come in the paint and 3-point range. Comes in on a heater as well, topping 45 fantasy points in 2 straight games. I do like him a little bit. He comes in at 5,600 on DraftKings, 6,700 on FanDuel. Again, I'm still leaning Buddy Hield in this spot over him. Justin Jackson, intriguing FanDuel candidate, or if you're building 150 lineups. Darren Fox, even interesting. Took a game off, makes for a pretty solid tournament option here against the Grizzlies. Again, someone that can hit in the paint and from 3-point range. And we've seen him go off against the Grizzlies 3 times this season already. So I really like Darren Fox in tournaments. And then Marvin Bagley, I think we have to talk about him. Obviously, some of his last game against Toronto got the minutes because of Nemanja Bjelica being out. Bjelica not on the injury report, expected to suit up, but prior to that last game, Bjelica was already ceding minutes to Bagley. I like Bagley in tournaments. This is a spot, has struggled against the Grizzlies twice this season, but again, with them struggling to defend in the paint, this is a spot where he could have some success because he takes a large portion of his shots in the paint, with 31% of his shots coming in that area. On the Memphis side of things, Mike Conley, Marc Gasol are the 2 options to heavily consider here. Gasol coming off a triple-double, his 2nd straight 22-point outing. Kings have been pummeled by opposing centers. They're giving at 21.3 points, 18.5 rebounds, 3.4 assists, and 55% shooting to centers. I really like him in cash. I really like him in tournaments. Unfortunately, it's going to be really hard for me to justify paying for Marc Gasol at 8,300 on DraftKings, 8K on FanDuel when I can get Vucevic or one of the potential value centers that may open up here tonight. I do like Mike Conley as well. Kings giving out the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing point guards, and their lack of rim protection is a boost for Conley. His minutes have been solid for the majority of the season. His production, unfortunately, has not, but this is a spot where I do have interest in him. Has produced solid games against the Kings this season already. You can look at Shelvin Mack as a value option. You can look at Justin Holiday as a value option. Garrett Temple is an interesting value option. Should play over 30 minutes in this spot against the Kings. It is a revenge game, and we know the Kings really struggle against opposing shooting guards. So I do have some interest in Garrett Temple as a value option here tonight. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on the rest of this game. You can look at Jaren Jackson or JaMychal Green in tournaments if you wish. Looking at the next game of the night, Toronto at Houston. Toronto 2-point favorites in this one, 229.5 over under. Chris Paul is questionable, not actually expected to play, looking like closer to the weekend for him. Brandon Knight questionable, Kawhi Leonard and OG Anunoby are probable. James Harden has recorded 21 consecutive 30-point outings. James Harden continues to be a monster. James Harden is obviously the highest upside play on the entire slate, especially if Chris Paul sits. Same thing I said last time, the same thing I've been saying for the past week and a half. You can fade James Harden in tournaments. James Harden is very rarely in GPP winning lineups. He was in it the other night because a crap ton of value opened up, and he put up almost 100 fantasy points against the Knicks. That being said, more often than not, he's not going to be in the tournament winning lineups. So in large field GPPs, you can fade James Harden. In cash, you're still most likely playing James Harden. I'm probably fading because, well, I'm a glutton for punishment, and I've been doing it for the past 2 weeks, and I've cashed almost every single slate whenever he has gone off. I even cashed last game without James Harden whenever he put up 100 fantasy points. So if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. Looking at the rest of the Houston side of the things, obviously Eric Gordon, Austin Rivers, PJ Tucker, the guys to look at. The Raptors have given up 37% shooting from beyond the arc over the last 10 games. That is a pretty big boost for guys like Gordon, Rivers, and Tucker because, well, most of their shots come from those areas. When you're looking at PJ Tucker, 70% of his shots come from three. Austin Rivers, 59% of his shots come from three. Eric Gordon, 56% of his shots come from three. Even Gerald Green, 82% of his shots come from three. All of these guys are in play. Obviously, the matchup not ideal for any of them, but we know the minutes are going to be solid for almost all of them. Outside of Eric Gordon, he's the only one where it's kind of questionable what his minutes are going to be. Obviously, we saw him play 37 against the Knicks. Given his injury history and how cautious they've tried to be with him, I don't know if he sees 37 minutes once again. I have him at 34 minutes. That makes him a pretty strong option at 5,300 on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel. You can use him in cash. You can use him in tournaments. We know the usage and the shots are going to be there for him. The shot hasn't been falling for him a whole lot recently, but I still think he's fine. Rivers and Tucker, again, two guys going to play a lot of minutes. Austin Rivers, 4,300 on DraftKings, 4,500 on FanDuel. Only saw 34 against the Knicks. Did struggle in that game, but he's still finding cash in GPPs. And then again, PJ Tucker gonna play a lot of minutes. 5K on DraftKings. He's also cheap on FanDuel at 5,100. Again, minutes are going to be there for him. Shots are going to be there for him. He has rebounding potential. I don't really need to go on and on about the Houston Rockets because it's the same thing it's been for the past 2 weeks. Kenneth Faried is the only one that I do actually want to talk about here. We have seen Toronto at times struggle against opposing bigs. We know the production's going to be there for him if he gets the minutes. We saw 26 minutes against the Knicks last game. He's just 5,300 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel. The FanDuel price a little less appealing. I still really like him, though. I still think he's going to be overlooked in this spot. 12 minutes against the Raptors. That was whenever he was with Brooklyn. Still put up 10 fantasy points. He still has the production. The production should still be there for him, so I do like him. Again, there's potential that there's going to be a lot of value opening up later on in the slate, so we may not need to go there, but he's still a pretty strong option here tonight. On the Toronto side of things, Kawhi Leonard expected to be back, and I absolutely love Kawhi Leonard in the spot. The Rockets have been allowing 117.2 points per game over the last 10 games. Kawhi leads the team in usage at almost 30%, so we know his hand's going to be in the in a lot of the Raptors' offense. Houston has just struggled to defend the rim in the mid-range, with Kawhi taking 77% of his shots in those areas. He's a guy that I absolutely love here tonight. I'm going to try to get D'Angelo Russell, Vucevic, and Kawhi in my lineups. Those are the three guys that I would really, really like to build around instead of paying up for James Harden. I love the upside on Kawhi in the spot. 9,500 on DraftKings, 10-3 on FanDuel. Going to be someone that I want to get some exposure to. I like Kyle Lowry and Danny Green in tournaments. Again, Kyle Lowry, 7,500 across the industry. Danny Green, 4,500 on DraftKings, 4,400 on FanDuel. Danny Green, almost always a better play whenever we have Kawhi Leonard in the lineup. This is a spot where, again, with Houston giving up a lot of points, Danny Green going to play a decent amount of minutes. Houston struggling. Just to defend anybody, I think there's a spot where Danny Green could have some success. I would definitely get some tournament exposure here tonight. Serge Ibaka, Pascal Siakam, obviously take a little bit of a hit, mostly Serge Ibaka whenever Kawhi Leonard is on the floor. with the Rockets giving up 48.5 rebounds per game over the last since Clint Capella went down, and the fact that they're allowing opponents to shoot 68% at the rim, Pascal Siakam is my preferred option here. 80% of his shots come at the rim or in the paint. So I'm going to give the slight edge to Siakam. 6,400 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel. I do like him a little bit more than Serge Ibaka. That being said, Serge Ibaka has been playing really well recently, coming off 23 points and 11 rebounds, his third double-double in the last 5 games. Again, give the slight edge to Pascal Siakam in this spot. Moving on, Clippers at Chicago. Clippers 5-point favorites in this one, 221.5 over under. We know Gallo is out, and we know Wendell Carter Jr. is out. Chicago is allowing opponents to shoot 46.6% from the floor in the season. They let the Hawks go off for 50% shooting last game. So, needless to say, this is a really good spot for the Clippers, and I definitely want to get some exposure here. Looking at that side of the ball, obviously Tobias Harris, one of the top options on the slate. He should absolutely feast here. He comes in at 8,200 on DraftKings, 7,900 on FanDuel. That price tag is way too cheap here. We saw 50 fantasy points out of him against the Heat. We saw 60 out of him against the Spurs, so you know he has the upside. The Bulls are giving out 47.5 rebounds, 47.5 points in the paint, and 67% shooting at the rim over the last 10 games. That definitely increases the floor for Harris. He has a 25% usage rate, averages 1.27 fantasy points per minute with Gallinari off the floor. I love me some Tobias Harris. Again, someone that I would love to get some exposure to. I just don't know if I'm going to be able to do it with Vucevic, Kawhi, D'Angelo, other guys that I really, really love in the spot. Montrezl Harrell has struggled. He's been in and out of the starting lineup of late. Hasn't really been able to hit the upside that we've been used to him doing. He's 6,700 on DraftKings, 7,200 on FanDuel. I like him in tournaments, especially at the DraftKings price. Again, these last few games, the rebounding really hasn't been there for him. The scoring's been fine. It's just been the rebounding, but with the Bulls really struggling to keep opponents off the glass, I think this is a spot where Montrezl Harrell could definitely have a big game. I do absolutely love Patrick Beverley here. The last 3 games, 42, 35, and 34 minutes. Since Gallo went down, we know he's going to play a lot of minutes with Gallinari being out. He's 4,800 on DraftKings, 4,800 on FanDuel. In cash, it's really tough to fade those minutes. Obviously, the production was not there against Miami, but the rebounding against Dallas and San Antonio really, really jumps off the page. We know he has the upside. The field goal attempts have been there for him. He just needs to hit those shots. This is a really good spot for him here tonight. I do like Avery Bradley in cash at his current price. He's just 3,900 on DraftKings, 3,200 on FanDuel. Obviously, the minutes are going to be pretty solid here for him as well. Production has been just atrocious for the majority of the season, but he's been over 20 fantasy points in 3 straight games. That's pretty appealing, especially in cash. Lou Williams can be used in GPPs. He's 6,700 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. Obviously, the issues that he's been dealing with the hamstring, a little bit concerning. The minutes are already going to be limited for him anyways. He rarely sees more than 30. But, 23, 21 over the last couple of games. That is also something to keep an eye on. We know the production, the per minute production is going to be there for him. It's just whether or not he gets the minutes. I like him in tournaments, not someone that I have interest in cash. Looking at the Bulls side of things, God, I hate the Bulls so much. Bobby Portis started the second half over Robin Lopez last game. Could end up back in the starting lineup here tonight. It is a really, really good spot for him. We know the Clippers, a team that struggles against opposing bigs. And, well, they can't keep opponents off the glass, and that bodes pretty well for Bobby Portis. The Clippers giving up 45.8 rebounds per game, 51.5 points in the paint, and they're getting pummeled in the paint and mid-range. That's pretty important whenever Bobby Portis takes 36% of his shots in the paint or the mid-range. I really, really like Bobby Portis in this spot. Clippers 4th in fantasy points per game allowed to opposing centers. The 33 minutes against the Hawks was really, really, really good to see. He didn't produce in those minutes, but at 5,700 on DraftKings, 5,300 on FanDuel, I really, really like Bobby Portis in this spot. Again, this game somewhere where I definitely want to get some exposure. Lauri Markkanen, 6,500 on DraftKings, 7,200 on FanDuel, is a solid GPP play. Clippers 20th in defensive efficiency to opposing power forwards, giving up 21.5 points, 10.3 rebounds, and a 48.3% and 34.1% shooting split over the last 10 games. The downside for Markkanen, usage 22.2% over the last 10 games. That's concerning. You have Zach LaVine, you have Bobby Portis, you have Jabari Parker dominating usage. Markkanen, again, 22.2% over the last 10 games. That's a little bit discouraging, but again, we know the opportunity to produce is going to be there for him. Zach LaVine, as I mentioned, 30% usage rate over the last 10 games. He's fine in GPPs, as I've alluded to. Recently, he has to score. He's very rarely doing anything other than getting you raw points. And so we definitely need him to get, 30, 28, 30, 32 raw points, and then maybe a couple of these rebounds and assists for him to actually pay off his salary. But with the usage being as high as it is possible for him to get there. Chris Dunn has some GPP appeal just because of his triple-double upside. He's 6,600 on DraftKings, 7,400 on FanDuel. I don't hate him in tournaments. Again, he's another guy. He is actually really good at getting the peripherals and things like that have been down in a couple of these games. Scoring has been up in those games, though, so would like to see that even out a little bit. Chandler Hutchison doesn't have a ton of upside, but has top 20 fantasy points in 5 of his last 6. He's more of a cash game value here tonight. Moving on, Detroit at Dallas. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on this game because, well, this game kind of sucks. 217.5 over under. Dallas 4-point favorites in this one. Andre Drummond expected to suit up. Ish Smith is doubtful, and Henry Ellenson is questionable. Detroit side of this game, mostly really, really unattractive. You can look at Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond as tournament options. We know both guys leading the team in usage. Blake Griffin 29.5% and Andre Drummond at 23.3%. If I were forced to get exposure here, I would probably go with Andre Drummond. Dallas has struggled to defend the rim. They're allowing 66.2% shooting at the rim, and Andre Drummond obviously taking almost all of his shots at the rim. 70% of his shots come at the rim, 25% of his shots come in the paint. The Mavericks have been really good against opposing power forwards, ranking 7th in defensive efficiency against them. They're just 15th in defensive efficiency against centers. So, again, I would give the boost to Andre Drummond, especially price considered 8,800 on DraftKings, 9,100 on FanDuel over Blake Griffin here tonight. Reggie Bullock is interesting. Dallas has struggled to defend corner threes over the last 10 games, allowing 40% on corner 3 attempts. He's taking 17% of his shots as corner threes. Dallas is also allowing opposing small forwards to shoot 43% from the floor and 36% from 3. So there's definitely a path to success for Reggie Bullock, who comes in at 4,400 across the industry. We know he's a guy most likely going to get 20 fantasy points. The minutes should be there for him. They weren't there for him against New Orleans, but he did take 12 shots, got you the rebounds and assists. It was just his shot wasn't really falling. Very, very similar matchup here for him tonight. So I really like Reggie Bullock if trying to get some exposure to this game. Price on Reggie Jackson makes him cash viable, 4,700 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel, but there's going to be better plays to look at, so I don't have a lot of interest in him here. The Dallas side, while marginally more attractive, is still not that attractive. Dennis Smith, Luka Doncic, two guys that I really do have some interest in. Doncic has struggled recently, 14 of 46 from the field over his last 3 games. That being said, it was encouraging to see last game with Dennis Smith back. He still had a really solid usage rate, 28.4% usage in that game with Dennis Smith back. 61% of his shots come in the paint, mid-range, or at the rim, where the Pistons have been just absolutely pummeled, giving up 68.4% at the rim, 42.5% shooting in the paint, and 41.8% shooting in the mid-range. I do really like Luka Doncic in this spot, and I guarantee you he will be low owned because, well, this game does not have a lot of appeal. I like Dennis Smith Jr. Really strong outing last game, 33.5 fantasy points against the Clippers. Solid matchup. He played a lot of minutes in that game, and that was good to see. Detroit 23rd in defensive efficiency to opposing point guards, and with Detroit allowing 68.4% at the rim, Smith could definitely have some success here. He takes 42% of his shots at the rim. So at 4,800 on Dennis Smith on DraftKings, I like the price tag. 5,900, more of a tournament price tag. over on FanDuel, but this is a pretty good spot here for Dennis Smith, so I definitely have some interest in him here tonight. You can look at Harrison Barnes, Wesley Matthews as cash game options. Again, matchup not that great for either one of those guys. DeAndre Jordan, a pretty strong tournament option. Again, with the Pistons struggling to defend the rim, he could definitely have some success. He's 7,100 on DraftKings, 7,700 on FanDuel, but again, as I mentioned a couple times already, there's just a lot of really, really good center options on this slate. Moving on, Charlotte at Milwaukee. Milwaukee 11-point favorites in this one, 228 over under. Cody Zeller and Dante DiVincenzo remain out. Brook Lopez been a Dikembe Mutombo machine recently with 16 blocks in his last 4 games. And Bismack Biyombo been rebounding like crazy, averaging 11.7 rebounds over his last 3 games. Looking at the Charlotte side of things, it is a pretty tough matchup for a couple of these guys. Kemba Walker, obviously not in the fantastic spot here. He has topped 40 fantasy points in 3 straight games. 69% of his shots come in the paint or mid-range or from 3, so he could have some success here tonight. The Bucks have been really good against opposing point guards, just giving up the 22nd most fantasy points per game. But with Kemba Walker taking a lot of shots in those areas where we like to take shooters against Milwaukee, I think he makes for a very, very strong tournament option here. 8,100 on DraftKings, 8,800 on FanDuel. Milwaukee has really struggled against shooting guards this season. They're 8th in fantasy points per game allowed. 38% of Jeremy Lamb's shots come in the paint or mid-range. And of course, we know he can get you the rebounds, assists, and steals and things like that. I like Jeremy Lamb at 5,200. Spot just seems he's just a little bit too cheap, I think, for the floor and the upside that he has. He's been pretty solid against Milwaukee twice this season, averaging just shy of 30 fantasy points. I really like him in the spot, 5,200 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. I really like Marvin Williams in this spot as well. It's a spot where I've been highlighting Marvin Williams for the past few games, actually for quite a while now. And if you've been using him, you've probably had a lot of success outside of obviously the Memphis game in Indiana where he did struggle to score a little bit, but with the potential that this game goes small because of just the way Milwaukee plays, Marvin Williams could have a lot of success here. Milwaukee allowing 39.7% on corner threes, 36.4% on above the break threes. And we know Marvin Williams, a guy that takes a lot of threes. 19% of his shots are quarter threes, 38% of his shots are above the break threes, totaling 57% of his shots coming from 3. We've also seen Milwaukee struggle against opposing power forwards. I really like the spot for Marvin Williams. If I'm getting exposure to this game, which I kind of want to because I think it'll go overlooked, it would be Marvin Williams and Jeremy Lamb from the Charlotte side of things. You could look at Parker Monk as FanDuel values Parker, or Malik Monk. Tony Parker probably the better option if you're trying to look that way. And then Bismack Biyombo, I would assume he gets most of the minutes here. Coming in at 4,100 on DraftKings, 4,800 on FanDuel. I just don't really see a reason to look there. Milwaukee, a really, really good rim protection team, and that's kind of a hit to opposing big men. Looking at the other side of this game, obviously Giannis is in a fantastic spot. I do absolutely love the Giannis pivot off of James Harden, mostly because of price. Giannis coming in at 10.7 on DraftKings, 11.5 on FanDuel. If he gets you 65 and Harden goes for like 75, I'm definitely okay with that pivot here tonight. 64% of his shots come at the rim. Leads the team in usage, obviously 30.4% and rebounding percent. So this is a spot Charlotte has really struggled to defend the rim without Cody Zeller on the floor. They're also really struggling to keep opponents off the glass without Cody Zeller on the floor. So Giannis should absolutely feast in this spot. The best place that I'm getting exposure continues to be Malcolm Brogdon, who for some reason his price just never seems to go up. He's 5,800 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel. In cash games, I don't really see a reason why you would ever fade Malcolm Brogdon for like ever. Just ever. The dude has just been so ridiculously consistent. He gets you there almost every single night. Never ever like this Miami game was a disappointment where he scored only 21 fantasy points in 23 minutes. We know the field goal attempts are going to be there for him. We know the peripherals are going to be there for him. He just gets there almost every single night. He just don't fade Malcolm Brogdon in cash. Like, he's the ideal cash game play. I love him in the spot. He has upside, too, with Milwaukee or with Charlotte struggling to defend the rim. Charlotte also struggles to defend opposing point guards, 19th in defensive efficiency to the position. I don't hate Eric Bledsoe in tournaments. His price tag somewhat unappealing here. He comes in at 7,400 on DraftKings, 7,700 on FanDuel. He's fine. Chris Middleton, not really a spot where it jumps off the page as far as the matchup goes for him, but he's 6,400 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. We know the minutes are going to be solid for him. We know he's going to get you in the mid 30s in a close game, mid to upper 30s in a close game. He has really struggled recently, some of these games being blowouts, but I do have interest in Chris Middleton. And then Brook Lopez, like I said, 11 blocks over the last 2 games, 16 over the last 4. It's fine. 5,500 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. It is a really, really, really good spot for him. But again, so many really good center options. It's hard to prioritize Brook Lopez here tonight. Looking at Minnesota at Utah this game, a lot of stuff up in the air right now. Utah 10-point favorites in this one, 222 over under. Jeff Teague questionable, Tyus Jones is out, Robert Covington is out, Dante Exum is out, Raul Neto is out, Thabo Sefolosha is out, and Derrick Rose I have listed as doubtful for this game after he was not able to finish last night's game left at halftime. Donovan Mitchell has been outstanding, has scored 20 or more points in each of the past 10 games, averaging 30.3 points over that span. Karl-Anthony Towns, 27 points and 12 rebounds against the Lakers, his 12th double-double in the past 15 games. Rudy Gobert has been on a roll. Jay Crowder has been on a roll, averaging 16 points over his past 4 games. The Minnesota side of this game, a lot of it relies on whether Derrick Rose is able to play or Jeff Teague is able to play. Andrew Wiggins, Karl-Anthony Towns, 2 guys that I do have a lot of interest in. Utah has struggled to defend the 3-point line, allowing 37% on above the break threes. That is a boost for Wiggins and Towns. If you take Teague off the floor and Covington off the floor, Towns 27.5% usage rate, averages 1.79 fantasy points per minute. If you take Rose, Teague, Covington all off the floor, Karl-Anthony Towns like almost 40% usage rate and something over 2 fantasy points per minute without James Harden or without those guys on the floor. It's a 41 minute sample size, but similar production to James Harden. Even though the matchup does really suck going up against one of the league's best defenses, it would be tough to fade that kind of production. He's 10K on DraftKings, 11-1 over on FanDuel. I'm assuming Teague is going to sit. I'm assuming Rose is going to sit. A couple days ago, Jeff Teague couldn't even run, so yeah, that tells you probably all you need to know. Jared Bayless, 0.90 fantasy points per minute, 24.1% usage rate with all those guys off the floor. Jared Bayless, I can't with this guy. He's been good the past couple of games. If he's going to be chalk, I'm 100% fading. I would rather have Shabazz Napier. I would rather have some of the other value that could potentially open up here tonight, but he's been over 30 fantasy points in the last 2 games. So he's probably going to be chalk if all those guys are out. The 0.90 fantasy points per minute and the 24% usage rate, it's 84-minute sample size. That is somewhat appealing, but again, I can't with Jared Bayless. Jared Terrell would be a really, 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 really strong tournament option to look at here tonight. He has like a 28.6% usage rate, averages 0.79 fantasy points per minute with those guys off the floor. I would maybe be willing to look at him over Jared Bayless just as like a tournament pivot. He can score. The guy can definitely score. Even Andrew Wiggins, 1.08 fantasy points per minute, almost 29% usage rate would be a way that I would not hate getting exposure to if Rose and Teague are both out again. Just kind of need to wait and see with what news comes out of that. Even Joshua Okogie, Taj Gibson, guys that we could consider, but again, just need to take a wait and see approach. No need to make decisions this early in the morning. We'll get news most likely early enough that we can adjust. So I will cover that in Discord. On the Utah side of things, Ricky Rubio revenge game. Donovan Mitchell, obviously in a really, really, really good spot. The price tag on Ricky Rubio is really appealing. 5,700 on DraftKings. That's pretty appealing. We saw him get a decent amount of minutes last game. Saw him play pretty well. That's promising. 24 minutes against Denver, 30 fantasy points. I really like him in the spot. We know Minnesota really struggling to defend opponents without Robert Covington being there. 62% of his shots come at the rim or from three. Minnesota has really struggled to defend those areas this season. I do really like Ricky Rubio in tournaments. I do think Donovan Mitchell is still going to come back down to earth at some point, but until it happens, might as well continue to ride it out. Has hoisted at least 20 field goal attempts in 3 of the last 4 games. Minnesota is allowing 37% shooting, or 37.5% shooting on 3-point attempts, with Mitchell taking a lot of 3-pointers. I think he can continue to put up big games. 33% of the shots come from beyond the arc, and he has been shooting really well from 3 so far in January. 42.5% shooting from beyond the arc this month. Minnesota is allowing 37.5% shooting, again, from the 3-point range. Sorry, I was rereading the same line I just read. Joe Ingles, guy that I want to talk about, went off against Denver. Very similar matchup for him. Wolves been lit up by opposing small forwards, ranking 4th in fantasy points per game, 28th in defensive efficiency, have allowed them to shoot 45.1% from the floor, 40.2% from 3. Joe Ingles, again, broke out against Denver. This is very, very similar matchup here for him tonight. Assuming the game stays close, we know the minutes are going to be there for him. We know the shot attempts are going to be there for him. 5,700 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel, a strong tournament option. I like Derek Favors in cash. I like Jay Crowder in cash and tournaments. He's kind of the preferred play because a large portion of his shots come from beyond the arc, coming in at 5K on DraftKings and 5,200 on FanDuel. Really safe floor, pretty high upside in this matchup here tonight. Was really solid against them the last time these teams faced off. You can look at Rudy Gobert, but not really a spot where I want to go too overboard here tonight. Phoenix at Denver, the last game of the night, and the one that we really, really need to pay close attention to because, well, there could be some suspensions, and we have a lot of questionable guys here. DeAndre Ayton, Rashawn Holmes, not expected to play in this one, but still listed as questionable. TJ Warren out a couple of weeks, and then Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Gary Harris, all guys that could potentially be suspended in this game. So again, we need to pay very, very close attention. With Warren out, obviously Kelly Oubre, Josh Jackson, 2 guys that we definitely want to consider. But if DeAndre Ayton and Rashawn Holmes are also out, that puts Dragon Bender in play here tonight. Again, I am assuming those guys are out, and that means Devin Booker, 27.7% usage rate, 1.37 fantasy points per minute is really, really intriguing. Kelly Oubre, though, 30.4% usage rate, 1.26 fantasy points per minute. He has been playing really, really, really well. He is fitting in really well in Phoenix, and he's the guy that I have the most interest in. 5,600 on DraftKings, 6K on FanDuel. We've seen him the last few games, again, play really well. Field goal attempts are there for him. Against Denver, last time these teams faced off, 9 of 17 from the floor, 11 rebounds, 52 fantasy points. Small forwards against Denver has been a thing, and his shot profile, 95% of his shots come at the rim or in the paint or above the break threes, and those are areas where Denver has really, really, really struggled lately. Denver's allowing 65% at the rim, 46.2% in the paint, 43% on corner threes, 36.4% on above the break threes, areas that I highlighted against the Utah Jazz, and that worked out really well. Booker really underpriced, I think, for his upside, especially on both sides. 7,900 on DraftKings, 8,300 on FanDuel. Josh Jackson has appeal here, 87% of his shots taken in the areas that we really, really want to attack. Those are the 3 guys that I have the most interest in. And now that we also have D'Anthony Melton, who is doubtful for this game as well, I forgot to put him in the notes. That means Elie Okobo is someone that we definitely have to consider as well, because, well, he should be playing a decent amount of minutes. I currently have him projected at 30 minutes here. Plenty of upside, plenty of potential to have a strong outing here. I like him as well. And McCall Bridges is even a really, really strong option here tonight. Looking at the Denver side of this game, it's really tough to break this down because I do expect at least Nikola Jokic to be suspended. I don't know about Gary Harris or Jamal Murray. That being said, if Jokic plays, he's perfectly fine in cash in tournaments. Obviously, a smash spot. A little bit of concern about blowout risk, but as I try to preach every single night, the last thing you should ever consider when building your lineups is blowout risk. We saw it happen yesterday with OKC and the Pelicans. Everyone thought that game was going to be over by halftime, and well, guess what? It wasn't. And if you faded that game, you probably had a really hard time cashing. Nikola Jokic is in a really good spot. 10-6 on DraftKings, 10-9 on FanDuel. I like the spot for him here tonight, especially if Aiden is out. He should just feast on Dragon Bender. If he sits, Mason Plumlee, obviously coming in at 3,900 on DraftKings, 4,300 on FanDuel, would be the basic lock of the night. Would play a lot of minutes, and Plumlee, a guy that puts up a significant amount of fantasy points whenever he plays a significant amount of minutes. That being said, there's other places to look as well. If Jokic is out, Paul Millsap would be one of my favorite options, and I don't think people are going to go there tonight. 5,100 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel, with Jokic off the floor, 1.51 fantasy points per minute, 28.6% usage rate. That's just way too cheap here for Paul Millsap, who right now, even if Jokic plays, is a really strong option. Did struggle against Utah, but we know the floor for the most part is going to be there for him, especially if this game stays close. That usage and production is really tough to overlook. Jamal Murray is a fantastic option here. Phoenix ranks 25th in defensive efficiency to opposing point guards and has allowed them to shoot 36.4% from three. Jamal Murray has torched the Suns this season. Last time these teams faced off, he put up 35 fantasy points, shot 4 of 17 from the floor. He's averaging almost 50 fantasy points per game against them, so that was his worst game against them. I like him if he plays. If he sits, Malik Beasley, Monte Morris, guys that we could definitely look at as value options. Gary Harris, if he plays, is currently like a somewhat decent cash option, somewhat decent tournament option. Obviously, we know the matchup is going to be ideal for him. Again, it's just a matter of whether or not he plays. Minutes starting to trend upward. That's really appealing here in the spot, especially if his minutes are going to be back up over 30. Will Barton, really appealing, 6,100 over on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. I like him a little bit more over on FanDuel because of that price tag. We saw him get 30 minutes last time out, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 22 real points. He would be the biggest beneficiary if Jokic and anyone else really misses this game. Outside of that, again, I will post in Discord who else needs to be considered. I'll update the projections whenever that suspension news comes out. Again, it's just almost impossible to break down too much of this game without that news. But that's going to go ahead and do it for this slate. I don't think I'll be doing one tomorrow, a podcast tomorrow, just 5 games tomorrow. So it means most likely we'll be back on Monday for that slate. So good luck in all your contests tonight, and I will see you on Monday.